Hello, welcome back to Reviews by Elaine, because I have opinions. Today I have opinions on Trickster's Choice by Tamora Pierce. I'm going to start by saying I actually bought the second one in this series years ago, like in college, and it sat on my shelf since then because I realized it was the second in a series and I don't want to read the second before I read the first. And I always intended to get the first, but just like it didn't just turn up, so I didn't. But that was until Hurricane Ida absolutely decimated my to-be-read shelf. I read so much during that time, and I kept picking up Trickster's Queen, the second one, being like, oh, I'm going to read this, and then realizing, no, it's the second. So after the storm, one of the first books I bought was the first in that series, Trickster's Choice. But the reason I was willing to buy Trickster's Queen without reading the back, without looking anything into this book, so much so that I had no idea it was a second, was because it was Tamora Pierce. And Tamora Pierce was one of those authors. Like, I feel like she was one of the biggest names in young adult fantasy in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I had never read her. So when I found that book in a thrift store, of course I bought it and took it home. But this book, Trickster's Choice, is about Allie, who is the daughter of two important figures, the most famous female knight in the kingdom and the spy master of the kingdom. She is getting near adulthood, and so her parents are expecting her to, start working towards her future life. They want her to get an apprenticeship, or become a squire, or become a scholar, or whatever. But she's not interested, because the one thing she does want to do is be a field spy working under her father, and neither of her parents like that idea. So she's just sort of avoiding responsibility. But then her mother comes home for a brief vacation from the war and starts really focusing on trying to get Allie to commit to some future plans. And so Allie just takes a boat and goes for a sailing trip, and while out, she gets captured by pirates and enslaved in a neighboring kingdom. As you do. Now, because she's been trained in a variety of spy skills, she has no fear whatsoever about getting home. But before she can get herself free, a god appears. He offers her a wager. He says that if she can manage to keep the children of the family she's been sold to alive until next summer, he will not only transport her home like that, but also he will tell her father that it's time for her to actually start working as a spy and that she's earned it. But it turns out the situation's a lot more complicated than she expected. It turns out there's a lot of political intrigue going on with this family that she was not aware of before she agreed to the wager. But also, as she settles into life with these people, she builds friendships, and she starts to care about a lot more than just the wager she has made with this god. But when I started this book, I was decidedly disappointed. After I had built this idea of Tamora Pierce as this amazing, great author, and I mean, it's not just me. Look at the cover here. Her name is significantly bigger than the title, and you don't generally get that by being a crappy author. So I had high expectations, and they were not being met. The world in this book felt really fan-fiction-y, which made me start to wonder, what makes something feel like fan fiction? And I think a large part of it is that there are too many ideas. Fan fiction, by its nature, is a collaborative art form. It features an author planting their own ideas on top of another world that has already been fully realized by another author. Which means that there's just too much often. Like, everyone must be special. Everything has to be special. Everyone is a main character level special because all of the side characters are almost always main characters in the original work. And I mean, yeah, in the real world, everyone is a main character in their own story. Everyone's special in their own way. But when you're meeting people in the street, you don't just magically know that that person is an expert at DDR, or that person once punched a shark to save a child, or that one over there paints beautiful pictures. Like, we don't know things about people. They are presented to us as flat characters. And often in fan fiction, there are way too many round characters and not enough flat characters. And you also see this in like role-playing games and any other collaborative world-building experience, because I mean everyone just wants their characters to have a full round arc. But eventually you have so many full round arcs that it sort of feels like you're standing in a room with hundreds of people in cosplay. Cool, but really artificial. And not all fanfiction is this way. I will tell you truthfully, there is some fanfiction that really manages to master the art of using just enough of the original world and inserting just enough of your own specialness that it feels integrated, and that the tone of what the fanfiction author is introducing matches the tone of the author. But the worst of it, it's not just the characters that are too much roundness. The world is the same way. Like a lot of fanfiction worlds, like of course there's already fully built world in the original work, and then the fanfiction author comes in with their own world building, so at this point every single detail is overstuffed. And that's sort of what this book feels like in the beginning. Every character we meet is super special. This character is the champion of the realm. That character is the spy master. This character is half god. That character is king. And the world is the same way. Like, everything you look at is a new system of magic, a new, like, mythological creature, a new different country that new wars are happening in, and different kinds of immortals. And not all of it seems to jive together well, in my opinion. Like, some of it feels really out of place. Now, I think in this case, the reason it felt this way is because even though this is the first of a two-part series, it is in the same universe that Pierce has written 18 other books in. And all of these books are interconnected. So, like, Allie's parents in this book are the heroes of previous stories. And, like, all of these expansive characters that we're meeting that seem a bit ridiculous are people who are featured in other stories. And the reason they seem overly stuffed is because she's referencing the other things that they've done. Now, I do think really expansive, densely populated universes like this can be done right. I mean, I really hope so, because I'm writing one. But it doesn't feel like it at the beginning in this book. And I think that's largely because she felt the need to tell us who all these people were, instead of just, like, letting them be characters and move on. She had to tell us why these characters were special when she talked about them. And I think part of that was thematic. Allie's journey is very much one of a child trying to step out of her mother's shadow. So her being ridiculously surrounded by ridiculously over-heroed characters could make it a more dramatic step out of the shadow, but it didn't really work for a different reason, which also made the book feel like a bit of fan fiction. And that is that Allie is good at everything. She knows from the moment she is captured she will be able to get free, because she just obviously knows how to escape from slavery. She knows that all she has to do is convince her parents that she can work as a spy and she'll be great at it. She knows immediately how to protect a castle. She knows how to fight. She knows magic that allows her to see when other people are lying. She knows how to pretend how to be less than she is. She knows how to talk to gods. She never doubts her abilities. She never seems really afraid. There's this weird scene where the author wants to show us that Allie is thinking of everything. And so when she runs off to get someone, she doesn't run in the way that a normal person runs. She runs in this super awkward way, like a normal maid would. As if normal maids are incapable of running. And I just set the book down being like, what? Seriously? She has to be uber good at running too? Even when the climax comes, Allie isn't presented as ever making any mistakes. Everything that goes wrong is something she had no control over. It gives this heavy Mary Sue vibe. And the problem with that, as a reader, is it undermines any stakes. Because if Allie never has any doubts about her abilities, we don't either. And it also has some serious not like other girl problems. Which is weird because This book is stocked to the rim full of girls who are not like other girls. Every girl is shown as not into girly things, like love and sewing. They are shown as flirting, but it's very clear and like directly stated that they don't see the flirting as just fun love, like normal girls do. No, it's a game to be played. It's intrigue. But it's still presented as if we're supposed to see this as something that makes them special. It's like, look, the lioness is the female knight. She is the first and the best. But Sari is also brilliant with a sword, and Dove is great with a bow, and Allie is an expert with knives, and Junai is an expert fighter. In the end, it just feels like too much exceptionalism. There's also a lot in this book about slavery and colonialism that I'm not sure is handled perfectly. Some of the things Allie says about enslavement of the Raka people when she first arrives in the Copper Isles is really dismissive. And I get that it was meant to be like she's going through a journey to gradually see how bad this is, but it doesn't really read as a journey. It just reads as her going back and forth between thinking it's not much to, oh god, it's terrible. And I appreciate the fact that Pierce is trying to talk about colonialism and cultural genocide, and even the fact that she is willing to tackle the really complex and difficult question of what the hell are you supposed to do with the descendants of colonizers if, you know, the locals, the indigenous people, are taking back their community. But there are a couple of moments where Allie is talking to people who have been enslaved and is encouraging them to remember that not all the colonizers deserve death. And I'm just like, nobody said they did. Like, none of the characters were saying that everyone of the white people need to die. No, instead, like, we have Ochibo, who is probably the most aggressive of the people, talking about, like, oh, I want these people out of my community. And, like, yeah, she's talking about violent revolution, but nowhere does she say anything about killing them all. And then Allie's sitting here repeatedly being like, y'all need to remember that not everyone deserves death. Remember, there can be peaceful solutions. And I'm like, why are you saying this? It feels really not right for those moments. But, like, all of this, it's not great, but it's also not terrible. Like, it's not the worst version I've ever seen of fantasy authors tackling the questions of colonialism, but it's also not the best. So, but that being said, by the time I got even halfway through this book, I was having so much fun reading it. Partially because once they got into exile, there were a lot less of the absurdly exceptional characters popping up every 2 pages. But also because the main characters in this book are fun and likable. For all her Mary Sue-ish tendencies, I liked Allie. I really liked Nawat, though it was also clear to me that Pierce wasn't entirely sure how to use him. Like, she really liked him and wanted him to be involved in the story a lot, but he wasn't. Like, there are so many moments where it's stated like, oh yeah, Allie spent a large portion of the day hanging out with Nawat, or she had this conversation with him, but we don't actually see those moments, and even when he's in the scenes, quite often he's saying next to nothing. But I also like Sari and Dove, and I'm interested enough that I know I will read the second book, especially considering I already own it. But also, I was tempted to pick it up as the next thing to read immediately after finishing this one. So, it is a good book. It's really flawed, but I really like it. It's complex, fun, and interesting, with a metric shit ton of multi-dimensional badass female characters. There are a lot worse things you can read than Trickster's Choice by Tamora Pierce.